2 out of 3 Americans file for Social Security before full retirement age. That number gets repeated on television, like a confession. The experts say it with a certain tone, as if millions of people all walked into the same trap because they lacked discipline, lacked patience, or lacked the intelligence to understand basic math. I do not like that kind of analysis. It is lazy, it flatters the commentator, and it insults the person who actually has to live with the decision. I have spent most of my life watching people confuse a clean formula with a sound judgment. They are not the same thing. A formula can tell you that waiting until 70 increases your monthly check. That is true, but a sound judgment asks a more important question. What assumptions are hiding inside that formula, and do those assumptions match your actual life? That is where the whole argument changes. The standard answer says wait as long as possible, delay to 70, collect the biggest inflation, adjusted check you can get. On paper, that sounds irresistible. If your full retirement age is 67, claiming at 62 cuts the benefit sharply, waiting until 70 lifts it materially. If all you see is the monthly number, the conclusion looks obvious. But monthly numbers are not the same thing as intelligent planning. Intelligent planning begins with reality. Reality says some people are healthy and some are not. Reality says some people have a spouse whose entire household plan depends on one filing decision. Reality says some people have a large portfolio that can either keep compounding or get carved up during a weak market. Reality says some people have a pension coming later, some do not. Reality says some people can no longer work at 62, even if they once believed they would keep going until 67. Reality says that a bigger check later is not automatically worth more than a smaller check. Now, it depends on what that earlier money prevents, what it unlocks, what it preserves, and how long you are realistically likely to live. That is the part the financial media hates to admit, because it ruins the simplicity of the headline. Sometimes filing at 62 is not a mistake. Sometimes it is the smarter move. Not because impatience is a virtue, not because math stopped mattering, because life is lumpy, households are complicated, and retirement is not won by obeying slogans. It is won by making the least foolish decision under your own conditions. When I look at Social Security, I do not begin with ideology, I begin with the structure. For anyone born in 1960 or later, full retirement age is 67. Claiming at 62 means taking a permanently reduced retirement benefit. Waiting beyond full retirement age increases the monthly benefit until age 70. That much is straightforward. The government has already done the arithmetic. The issue is not whether the arithmetic exists. The issue is whether you are using the right arithmetic for your own life. That is the whole game. If a person tells me, Warren, I know waiting gives me a bigger monthly check, so obviously waiting is better, I immediately know they are still looking at the problem through a straw. They are staring at one variable and ignoring the system around it. The correct question is never, how do I get the largest monthly benefit? The correct question is, how do I create the strongest lifetime outcome for the life I am actually likely to live, with the household I actually have, the health I actually have, the assets I actually have, and the risks I actually face? That question is harder. It is also the only one worth answering. There is another reason this topic gets mangled. People love to talk about the break, even point as if it were a verdict handed down from heaven. They say if you claim early and live long enough, the delayed filer comes out ahead. Fair enough. In many comparisons, the rough crossover lands somewhere in the late 70s or early 80s. That is useful, but it is not a ruling. It is a frame. A frame is not a decision, a break. Even estimate does not tell you whether your spouse needs income. Now, it does not tell you whether your body will still let you enjoy the later years you are trying to optimize for. It does not tell you whether early benefits would let you preserve an investment account that might otherwise get raided during a bear market. It does not tell you whether your household already has another guaranteed income source coming later. And it certainly does not tell you how much psychological relief comes from replacing uncertainty with a real monthly deposit. People underestimate that last one. During the working years, income arrives because you show up, you trade time, attention, energy, and stress for cash flow. In retirement, that machine changes. The human being who used to produce the paycheck now has to decide when to turn on the systems they spent decades funding. That is a strange transition. It is not just financial, it is emotional. The first Social Security payment is not merely money. For many people, it is proof that the next chapter has actually begun. That is why I want to deal with this honestly. There are very real situations where taking Social Security at 62 deserves serious respect. One of the clearest is a household where filing unlocks meaningful spousal income. This is where individual optimization and household optimization part ways. A great many bad financial decisions begin with somebody optimizing the wrong unit. They optimize themselves when the real economic unit is the family. They optimize one account when the real unit is the balance sheet. They optimize one tax year when the real unit is the lifetime after tax outcome. Social Security is full of that trap. If one spouse has the stronger earnings history and the other spouse has little or no meaningful work record, the higher earner's filing decision can determine when spousal benefits become available. That means a delay that looks elegant on a spreadsheet for one person may be starving the household of years of legitimate income. A spouse's benefit can be worth real money, not theoretical money, not someday money, household money. Grocery money, insurance money, travel money, breathing room money. Now look at the trade carefully. If the stronger earner waits 8 more years to maximize the personal benefit, the household may forfeit 8 years of additional cash flow that could have been pulled into the family earlier. In some cases, the cumulative household loss during that delay is larger than the abstract gain people brag about at 70. That is the first identity shift. You are not a lone claimant. You are a household cash flow architect. Once you start thinking that way, a decision that looked suboptimal in an article can become entirely rational in a home. Another legitimate case is a single person whose health, family history, or present conditions make a long lifespan less likely. Nobody enjoys this conversation, which is exactly why too many people avoid it. But denial is not planning. If your family history is poor, if chronic illness is already on the table, if your doctor has run uncertainty very real, then pretending you are guaranteed to live well past the break. Even point is not prudence. It is fantasy dressed up as virtue. Insurance only has value if it lines up with the risk you actually face. If your odds of reaching the later payoff years are materially weaker than average, then the logic of waiting weakens with them. A check you never live long enough to enjoy is not a triumph of discipline. It is just uncollected potential. In that case, starting earlier can be a way of converting an uncertain future advantage into real present value. You are not giving up. You are recognizing that the timing of dollars matters and that a smaller stream that arrives during your actual lifetime may be more valuable than a larger stream that arrives too late. People hate saying that out loud because it feels grim. I think it is the opposite. It is respectful to your own biography, respectful to the facts, respectful to the idea that money is supposed to serve a life, not win a theoretical argument after the life is over. The next case is more subtle, and it is one of the few places where couples who think clearly can create a better result by abandoning cookie. Cutter advice: suppose one spouse has the larger future benefit and the other spouse has reasons to claim earlier. Or suppose one spouse's health outlook is materially shorter while the other is likely to live longer. Now survivor benefits enter the picture and the problem changes shape. Once one spouse dies, the surviving spouse generally ends up with the higher of the two benefits, not both. That means the sequencing of who claims, when they claim, and whose record matters more, can materially alter the household's lifetime income path. This is where simplistic language becomes dangerous. People hear always delay, number not always. Sometimes the lower earner taking benefits earlier while the higher earner protects the larger survivor base makes sense. Sometimes early claiming on one record creates useful income in the present while still preserving the stronger long-run safety net. Sometimes a household is not deciding between early and late in the abstract. Sometimes it is deciding between income, now plus a stronger survivor structure later, versus a mathematically larger personal benefit that ignores the family's real risk map. That is not a small distinction. That is planning. There is another case that looks counterintuitive until you remember how compounding works. A person retires at 62, is no longer working, and has a sizable nest egg. The usual script says that a financially strong person should be the perfect candidate to delay Social Security. After all, they can afford to wait. That sounds plausible. It is not automatically true if you have a meaningful portfolio and you are already retired. Every year you delay benefits is a year you may be drawing more heavily from invested assets to cover your spending. That means you are not just waiting for a larger government check. You are also deciding to liquidate more of your own compounding machine. In the meantime, now put some realism around that. If markets are calm, maybe the cost is manageable. But markets are not required to be calm. If the first years of retirement coincide with a poor return sequence, then larger portfolio withdrawals can do permanent damage. You are not merely spending money. You are shrinking the capital base during the years when the portfolio is most vulnerable. That is how sequence risk does its ugly work. A retirement plan can look robust on average and still get badly wounded by bad timing in the opening years. In that environment, claiming Social Security at 62 can function like shock absorbers. It reduces how much you need to pull from investments. It lets more of the portfolio stay invested. It can lower the odds that a bad market early in retirement permanently changes your standard of living. This is why I always tell people that a government benefit is not just a check. It is also a claim on how much pressure your other assets must absorb. Early Social Security can, in the right balance sheet, be less about maximizing the check and more about protecting the compounding engine that has the potential to produce far more over time. That is not a universal truth. It is a structural truth that applies to certain people. The same logic extends, in a different form, to the person who does not urgently need the Social Security income, but is an experienced investor and intends to put the money to work. I say this carefully because I do not want anyone to misunderstand the risk. A delayed benefit is a government-backed increase in future monthly income. Replacing that with market exposure is not a free lunch. It is a deliberate exchange. You are swapping a larger guaranteed future stream for smaller, earlier checks that you then invest. If you are reckless, that is foolish. If you are experienced, liquid, temperamentally steady, and fully aware that markets can punish you for years, it can be a rational wager. The point is not that everyone should do it. The point is that finance is full of situations where the right answer depends on what sits on the other side of the decision. If early benefits allow an unusually capable investor to deploy cash under conditions where they are not forced sellers, not emotionally fragile, and not depending on the money for groceries, then the standard slogan loses its force. What matters then is not the elegance of the rule. What matters is whether the household can convert the earlier stream into a superior long-run result without assuming reckless risk. That is a very different question from the one most articles ask. Then there is the retiree who knows another guaranteed income stream is coming later. A pension, a deferred annuity, some other dependable income floor that begins at 65, 67, or later in that case. The Social Security decision is no longer being made in a vacuum. The later years already have support on the schedule. The real problem becomes the gap between 62 and the date when that later floor turns on. If claiming early fills the gap cleanly, reduces the draw on savings, and gets the household from here to there without unnecessary strain, then early claiming can be highly sensible. You are using one guaranteed stream to bridge to another guaranteed stream. You are not ruining the future. You are smoothing the path. A lot of foolishness in retirement comes from pretending every decision must maximize one variable forever, instead of recognizing that some decisions exist to solve a specific stretch of time. Retirement is full of bridges. Bridge to Medicare, bridge to pension income, bridge to a home sale, bridge to a spouse, later benefit, bridge to the point where required spending falls. If you mistake a bridge problem for a lifetime maximization problem, you can make the wrong choice with enormous confidence. Now let us come to the case that is perhaps the most human of all, the person who simply cannot keep working. This is where the moralizing tone of financial advice becomes intolerable. A man spends 30 years doing physical labor. His knees are damaged, his back is unreliable, his sleep is broken. Or a woman in her early 60s loses her job, sends out applications for months, and discovers what polite society likes to deny, which is that age discrimination can be illegal and still be very real. Or someone develops chronic pain, caregiving obligations, or simple exhaustion that no spreadsheet can feel. Then the commentary class says, the mathematically optimal move is to delay. That is not wisdom. That is abstraction without mercy. If you cannot work, and if you do not have sufficient assets to bridge the years comfortably, Social Security exists for exactly that moment. It is not evidence of failure. It is evidence that you paid into a system built to catch people when the labor market stops cooperating with the body or with the facts of life. Of course, you should test alternatives first. Can you move to lighter work? Can you cut costs? Can you use savings for a limited period? Can you create a hybrid plan? All of that matters. But once the facts are clear, shame has no place in the room. A benefit exists to be used. Refusing to use it because somebody with a microphone thinks waiting sounds more sophisticated is nonsense. That brings us to a very important reversal. Just because claiming at 62 can be smart does not mean it is smart for everyone. I have no patience for one-size-fits-all advice. And that cuts both ways. If you are still working and earning a substantial income before full retirement age, early claiming often becomes messy very quickly. Benefits can be withheld if earnings are above the annual exempt amount before you reach full retirement age. That creates confusion, frustration, and a permanent reduction issue that may not be worth the trouble. In plain English, if your work income is still strong, taking reduced benefits too early can create a lot of noise for surprisingly little gain. Likewise, if Social Security will be the foundation of your retirement, not a supplement, then the logic of waiting becomes stronger. When the check is your core floor, every extra dollar of guaranteed monthly income matters. The difference between an adequate check and an inadequate one is not theoretical. It can be the difference between calm and anxiety for decades. People with thin savings, long life expectancy, and heavy dependence on Social Security need to take the delayed benefit argument very seriously. The same is true if you are healthy. Longevity runs in your family, and your household truly can afford the wait without injuring other parts of the plan. In that case, a larger inflation-adjusted lifetime benefit can be exactly the kind of durable income base you want to lock in. The trick is to arrive at that conclusion, honestly, not by parroting something you heard on television. I want you to notice something important. This entire discussion is not really about age 62. It is about false certainty. The human mind loves clean commandments because commandments are cheap. They remove the burden of thinking. Always delay is attractive for the same reason. Always buy or never sell is attractive. It sounds strong. It saves time. It eliminates ambiguity. But retirement is not built on commandments. It is built on trade-offs. Trade-off between larger checks later and usable money. Now, trade-off between personal maximization and household optimization. Trade-off between delayed guaranteed income and preserving invested capital. Trade-off between actuarial tables and your actual body trade. Off between elegance and survivability. That is why I think this decision should be treated with more seriousness and less dogma. Before anyone files, I would want 5 things on one table. I would want the actual benefit estimates at 62, at full retirement age, and at 70. I would want the household map, not just the individual map. Who depends on whom? Which spouse has the larger record? What survivor income would likely look like? Whether a spouse's filing path changes the family's real outcome? I would want an honest health assessment, not wishful thinking, not panic, honesty. I would want a clear view of the balance sheet, portfolio size, spending need, other guaranteed income sources, liquidity, tax consequences, exposure to sequence risk, and I would want the work reality. Not the fantasy version of work, but the actual version. Can this person continue? At what cost, with what odds of finding comparable employment? If laid off, with what physical and emotional burden? Once those facts are on the table, the answer usually becomes much less mysterious. People imagine retirement planning is about finding the one brilliant rule. It is not. It is about arranging a set of imperfect truths in the right order. Here is the deeper mechanism underneath this entire subject. Social Security is not merely an income decision. It is a timing decision. And timing decisions are never isolated. They reach into taxes, portfolio withdrawals, spouse planning, survivor income, market risk, health risk, and behavior. That is why a person can make the right textbook decision and still get a bad life outcome, or make the wrong textbook decision and get a very strong life outcome. The textbook is optimizing the wrong machine. You are not a textbook, you are a system. So I want to leave you with a tougher standard than the one you usually hear. Do not ask whether claiming at 62 is smart in general. That is a journalist's question. Ask whether claiming at 62 increases or decreases the strength of your household system. Does it unlock income that your spouse needs? Does it protect your portfolio from unnecessary withdrawals? Does it make sense in light of your health and realistic longevity? Does it bridge you to another source of lifetime income? Does it rescue you from a labor market or a body that will no longer cooperate? Or does it simply reduce a future benefit that your household will badly need for decades? That is the real test. In investing, I have always believed that the best decisions are the ones that still look intelligent, after you include the things everybody else left out. This is one of those decisions. The crowd sees a reduced check and stops thinking. The disciplined planner keeps going. He asks what the reduced check buys, what it protects, what it unlocks, what it replaces, and what risk it removes. That is where the truth lives. Sometimes the truth says wait. Sometimes the truth says file. The danger is not in choosing 62. The danger is in choosing anything, because someone else made your life sound simpler than it really is. If you are healthy, well-funded, and building a durable, guaranteed floor for a long life, delaying may be exactly right. If your spouse's income depends on your filing, if your health changes the odds, if your assets need protection, if later guaranteed income is already coming, or if work has effectively ended whether you wanted to or not, then filing at 62 can be not just defensible, but wise, not emotionally wise. Financially wise, strategically wise, humanly wise. That is the standard I care about. You do not win this game by sounding sophisticated at a dinner party. You win it by building a plan that fits your life closely enough that you can live inside it without regret. So tonight, I want you to ask yourself one question, and I want you to answer it without ego. If I file at 62, what exactly does that earlier money allow my household to do, protect, or avoid that waiting would put at risk? Write the answer down, not the slogan, not the comment section answer, your answer. Because once you know what that earlier income actually changes, you are no longer debating ideology. You are finally making a decision, and that is when retirement planning starts to become real.